we're back. College basketball time here on the Chase Moss podcast with Stats by Will. We're taping this on a Thursday afternoon. Will, good evening, sir. How are you doing?
Doing well today. It's nice to be alive after last night's mega storm that just parked the bus over Knoxville for 6 hours. So
It was baffling because I think my podcast co-host on Wednesday nights, Matt, I messaged him during it. I was like, we gotta we don't have much time because the sounds are actually pretty terrifying. And
yeah,
I was concerned that I was gonna lose power in the house and fry all my stuff where that was the most consistent lightning, thunder, rain sounds. And then I went outside and looked at it after we were done and it's like, oh my goodness, this is it was one of the more crazy storms I've ever seen. And then I saw this morning that the fort, like there were a bunch of kids who lost their cars. They just like floated away. Did you see that? Like with the severe
no,
flooding in Fort Sanders this morning.
wow.
So those are all gone. But yeah, it's pretty wild for folks that were not familiar. If you look on Twitter and just look at Knoxville storm, you'll see some amazing radar detector stuff. I don't know what to call the equipment for meteorologists, but they basically showed how insane the storm really was and where it was. And like you said, parking a bus there for like 6 hours. And let me just go ahead and tell you, Khaleesi the dog was not a fan of what was happening last night.
There that old Mother Nature was Atletico Madrid just parking it until we finally gave in.
I like that. That's a deep cut. Does Cedric get a phase at all by the weather? No.
No, there were a couple of thunder booms, like 5 a.m. where so
Mm,
he jumped up for a minute to be with us, and then after he heard one of those, he ran off to another room. Then he came back, and he kind of went back and forth for a little bit. So
he's built different.
yeah, their normal rain does not spook him whatsoever. He just sleeps
Mm.
through it, but thunderstorms will get him a little bit. But I know it's different with dogs.
Interesting. Okay. I like it. I like it. If Khaleesi woke up at 5 a.m. this morning with the storm, guess what? Didn't know because I'm essentially dead when I'm asleep. So nothing could wake me. I would sleep through all of that. Well, Will, ostensibly, this is a college basketball program that we do every single Thursday night. We have some college basketball to talk about, sir. And one of it is the transfer winners, and not winners in terms of what they brought in, but winners in who they're able to retain. Which, if what happens now, or what was introduced today on Twitter, where it's like the one-time rule being taken away, if that goes into effect, like this is going to be a yearly thing to watch. Is just who can retain the most people each and every year, because that might decide who wins the title because of how important continuity is in winning a title in sports in general. So that's going to be an arms race and just chaotic and an absolute mess and not good. I'll just go ahead and say it's probably not going to be good for the sport and the health of the sport, but it's coming, and it's one of those things where I just can't get I can't get all up in arms about stuff that's out of my control. It's just kind of, you got to keep rolling with the punches. I have my take, you have your take. I think we're on the same page with a lot of this stuff, but I don't know. It feels like I'd be yelling and screaming into the void, and that's just not really my jam. But I think it's
That's
going to be
also just like an everyday activity now, yelling and screaming into the void.
that for a lot of folks, not for me. I'm not logging on to twitter.com and doing such things, but there are a lot of folks who spend the day yelling into the void and commenting on people's posts that they disagree with, and then expecting a very beneficial, thoughtful back and forth that results in both sides seeing and understanding each other even better than they did previously.
I
There,
need
it's
to I need to find the I'm not a TikTok user, but I did see this as a TikTok video. It's a video of a guy watching hockey, and he says, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Game's on." And then he just keeps pointing to the screen, says, "Game's on." Keep talking. Game's on. That's how I feel about some of this stuff. Game's
I
on.
will tell you, I completed my homework assignment you gave me at Double Dogs on Tuesday. Was it Wednesday? When did we meet? Tuesday? Wednesday?
Tuesday. I'm
Yeah.
struggling to recall the assignment.
You
Oh,
gave me
was
an
it the rehearsal?
yes.
Okay. Let's save that for the end. I do want to hear your thoughts.
Okay. I
Because
like it.
I actually do want to correct something you said earlier too. This is actually a running podcast that's like on the side about college basketball.
So, I mean, hey, we learned that Will is a headband guy. So for all the East Tennesseans that feel like they've seen Will out running the streets of Knoxville, Tennessee, and they're not 100% certain because they're like, I've never seen him in a headband, so I don't know if that's him. If he's in a headband and it's early in the morning, it's probably Will Warren.
It's almost certainly me.
Don't
I
say
have been
hi.
surprised at the lack of headband usage I've seen out and about. Maybe it's just like different strokes for different folks, I guess. But for me, I can't stand when sweat gets in my eyes or just on my, like below the eyebrows in general. So the headband is a lifesaver in the summer here.
Oh, I'm a headband guy. I'm a headband, Zach Wilson headband kind of guy. I love that Jordan. Like the ninja headband is
the
my
tennis
jam.
wrap.
Yes, that is my jam. Like that one is cool. And I feel like a ninja whenever I put it on. That's what I want to feel like if I'm exercising. I want to feel cool because I don't feel cool most of the time because I don't know about you, but being a sports writer or sports podcaster doesn't make you feel like the coolest guy in school all that often.
Well, I mean, being known as the guy who can interpret Excel sheets doesn't really make me feel like I've got popularity status. So
when you say, I don't even know what that
right
means. Interpret Excel sheets, like in term. Never mind. Never mind.
I can tell people what stats mean. That's my skill.
That's why they call them stats by Will.
Social talking skills, not really there. Excel interpretations, 100%. I'm your guy.
I think we did pretty well in our Double Dogs lunch. I think it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Good meal. It was fun. It was fun. Shout out to Double Dogs over there in Knoxville. And not shout out to our favorite Mexican restaurant that we were going to go, that Che Guevara. 10 out of 10. Best one in Knoxville. Not open for lunch. Just not available. Yeah. Not broadcasting. Che Guevara listeners, let us help you. Fix the website and let folks know that you're not open during lunch hours. Because I was driving down the road and I was like, I cannot wait to eat lobster quesadillas. Like this is just going to be an absolute... Yeah, they have lobster, and you can just put lobster in whatever you want, whatever Mexican dish you want. It's 10 out of 10. I'm all about it. And that wasn't the case. We pulled up, and it was our worst fears realized.
It was just people going to yoga class.
Again, worst fears. Like just running into people going to yoga class.
For the non-Knoxvillians, they have Z in the first name, so you can't be offended by the restaurant name Che Guevara. So
do they really? I've never
right there.
We wouldn't even know because they don't use signage. It's a cool place where it's like you wouldn't even know what you're walking into.
That's the amazing thing. You could walk into like a barber shop on accident.
Yes, which I'm okay with, and that's like one of the cool things about those local spots where it's like you don't even know, like you would never know it exists unless you're a local Knoxvillian. I think it's impossible to know, which is cool. That concludes the East Tennessee tourism industry update for the folks coming into Knoxville this fall for Tennessee football games and their team coming in. They're like, where should we go eat? Oh, we got you covered right there. Che Guevara. Well, let's see. What was I getting into?
We were talking about transfer retention.
Yes,
and
there we go.
I completely ruined the first 5 minutes here.
You're totally fine.
Apologies to Chase's dad who enjoys these shows.
He does. He gave me his top list, and he's going to listen to this. And he's like, oh, I got another shout out. So he likes hearing the shout outs on the program. So shout out to my dad for listening to the pod. So there you go. Top 20, though. They did a really good piece by one of my favorite college basketball writers, Jeff Borzello, on teams who kept their team together the best. And we knew Virginia was going to be on this list. We knew North Carolina was going to be on this list. We knew Gonzaga was going to be on this list, but I think perhaps the most interesting is number 1, the TCU Horned Frogs, where Jeff wrote, quote, Jamie Dixon has all 5 starters back from the team that took Arizona to the brink in the second round of the NCAA tournament. The lone loss was reserve guard Francisco Farabello, an excellent outside shooter, but the Horned Frogs bring back everybody else. So a lot of upside for the Horned Frogs. Were you surprised to see them number 1?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to disagree with any of the top 4, which in order were TCU, Virginia, Dayton, UNC. The only argument that I could really see is like you can move Virginia ahead because they bring back their top 6 players instead of top 5. And honestly, you could make a good case for UNC being number 1 simply because they brought back pretty much everybody important not named Brady Manick. But that's a good list. I mean, TCU should open the season, in my opinion, as a low-end top 25 side. I think they're going to get a little too much steam from taking Arizona to overtime, which felt really impressive at the time, and then Arizona just got demolished by Houston immediately after that. So a little less exciting, but still pretty cool. But I liked that top four. And, even Gonzaga at number 5, I hesitate to call them a winner on these lists because it's like, who really, if you're going to play, of course, like if you're not going to play, transfer to your thing, if you're going to play, why would you ever leave Gonzaga? So I wouldn't be, it's kind of hard to call them a winner when it's like they should just be a winner every year. It would be like somebody transferring out of Kentucky if they were going to start.
Well, I think they deserve credit for keeping Hickman and Salas,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Like, I think because they just didn't play, and I think they have opportunities to go play anywhere else when you're 5-star kids. Like, that's a bold
Yeah.
move to not play them, but you need that respect, and it's like they have the culture and the history that you can do that. Like, most teams cannot do that. You cannot, like, Rick Barnes, as much as we love him, he can't just be like, you're gonna have to this is gonna be one of those things, Phillips, where you're gonna have to come off the bench and you're gonna have to earn your spot. No. You're playing right away. Like, that's what's happening here. You're playing.
Well, yeah, I definitely give him credit for that too. Like because I mean, for those two to stay after they added Malachi Smith from UTC, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, like, the thing about Gonzaga is sort of regardless of your status. I mean, Chet kind of automatically got to start this year, but if you're a sub Chet level recruit, like if you're not going in the top 5 in the draft, you're really going to have to fight for your minutes. And I mean, the guys that stay kind of end up being everybody's favorites. So good for them.
Shout out to the WCC though. I had University of Portland head coach on yesterday, Shante Leggins, and he was good. He was a lot of fun. Dude. I like him a lot. He was really good. And you go through it, and I didn't realize like Steve Lavin's now in this conference, and you go up and down the list. It's actually like Ramar is in this conference. The WCC, man, sneaky strong. I mean, BYU is going to exit next year, but I don't know. And I mean, a lot of tournament teams, like half the conference is a tournament light team. Like, there's a case for a lot of these schools. So I don't know. The WCC is a sneaky strong basketball conference. Now, it's not just Gonzaga and the rest of everybody else. And we'll get to a team that gets overlooked often outside of Gonzaga. But I don't know. WCC, pretty solid.
Yes. I would like to shout out one team that I was honestly surprised to not see on this list. I understand the criteria is more or less like teams that were either in the tournament or in the hunt for the tournament.
Right.
And so to not see Liberty on that list was a little bit of a surprise because I know technically they ended up like 120th or so in Ken Palm and they lost their conference semifinals. You could make the argument they weren't really in the hunt, but they won their regular season title and were considered the best team in the Atlantic Sun basically all year. And I wanted to give them credit. I know, like, do I ever want to give credit to anything happening at Liberty University? Not really. But that being said, Richie McKay, I don't know if people know this. Liberty has won 104 games in the last 4 years.
That's wild.
They've basically seen nobody of serious note transfer out during that time. And they have who I consider college basketball's best threat at a 60-point game, Darius McGee coming back. It didn't seem like he was a real threat for anything other than the pros at any point. And 7 of their top 8 scorers are back this year. For a team at their level, to do that, to hold it together like that, and really go for one big run at the tournament this year, that to me is a pretty big deal because we don't really see those type of success stories at mid-majors as much anymore. So, I mean, again, that's 7 of the top 8 coming back from a team that was one win away from the tournament.
I think there's a Sunday sermon that we could pull out of this where it could be, do you know who didn't enter the transfer portal when he had every reason to? Will Warren? Job. He stayed. Right. He trusted the process. He didn't enter the portal, and he saw it through. That's what I was thinking about here. I was like, how does Liberty how are they able to keep these guys from leaving in the portal? It's like, who didn't enter the portal? Job.
That's right. They're playing that Kanye song where he says he thought the book of Job was a job. Which, sadly, that's like the best song on that album. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, of the returning, no offense to our folks, like, we mean it in good fun. They're I think have a sense of humor about this stuff. I am curious, though, of the returning starters for TCU, who do you think has the highest upside? Who do you think will be the best player returning? Who do you think will be their leader?
Emmanuel Miller has been my favorite, one of my
Hmm.
favorites for a while because he was awesome at A&M and he was awesome on a bad team, so he stood out more to me. And he is, he's been a significant player most of his career. I want to see him and what he and Mike Miles can do together
Mm.
out there. Those are the two guys that I point to as if TCU is going to do more than round of 32. And, you know, not that they should have been expected to achieve anything more last year, but if Jamie Dixon's going to finally sort of cash in all of that bad luck he's built up in March for like 2 decades into one big run,
Mm.
those two guys would be the dudes to push it forward.
I could see that. They're fascinating. And it's also like one of those things too with Jimmy Dixon. Do you remember like the context about him leaving Pitt
Mm.
years ago now where we were like, "Ooh, that's weird. Why would you leave Pitt for TCU? That seems like an odd choice." I think he made the right choice.
Yeah.
I think Jamie Dixon saw something that the rest of us did not see at that moment. But yeah, it's a tough look for Pitt basketball right now, and TCU basketball really
Yeah.
strong with Jamie Dixon.
And I mean, like, is it going to feel weird to see TCU as a top 25 team this year? Oh yeah, like it's unusual, but everything is impossible until it's possible in college basketball. Like if you
Right.
had told me Texas Tech would be a top 5 program 5 years ago, everybody would have laughed at that.
Yeah.
And now look at them.
I mean, I think a lot of people just expected them to drop off this past year,
Yeah.
losing Chris Beard, and it's a good program, and they're in good shape. Way too early. This is your bread and butter. Way too early. 2023 March Madness field from Joe Lenardi, noted Tennessee Volunteer hater. Joe Lenardi, for the folks that don't remember that coverage and his defense of the seeding for Tennessee, that was a fun time. That man took some heat
Hmm.
from Tennessee Twitter during that time period. But what stood out to you from his way too early bracketology?
I think as long as people treat this as the precise, silly exercise that it is, no one should be mad about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fake bracket produced 3 months before any on court basketball takes place. I think it's pretty funny. But anyway, and I know that this is probably going to surprise loyal listeners. I don't actually disagree with much of anything, at least
Hmm.
on the top end. So the one seeds here are in order, at least as far as I can tell, they're in order: Gonzaga, UNC, Kentucky, Houston. I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I don't see a real argument for any of those four entering the year lower than sixth or so in a given poll. And those very well could just be the top four in the AP in that order.
Hmm.
And really, all of the 8 teams he's got in the top 2 seed lines, those are teams I would see as no worse than top 10 or 11 sides. I mean, Texas as a 2 seed does feel a little strange at first, but Texas brings back a lot from what was a good team that, if they can figure out the offensive side of it a little bit more this year and be a little less cringy to watch, I mean, they could very easily be a top 10 group. So I didn't see anything noteworthy in a bad way. I do find it, very on the nose, thanks Joe, that Tennessee is a 3 seed in this, which is, I mean, probably about fair. I would probably say they're a little higher, but 3 seed seems fine. Same with Duke. I feel like Duke should be higher, but I totally understand skepticism of how it's going to work in the transition year, despite them on paper having what I think is a top 5 roster. Um, the only other glaring like show your work type of thing I saw, so he's got Illinois as a 6 seed.
Hmm.
I'm higher on them than that. I think they're going to be a low end top 15 group, but even then, that's a difference of 2 seed lines. So
Hmm.
I didn't see anything at first glance where I felt, a strong disconnect with what Lenardi was seeing. So I don't know. I guess I like Joe Lenardi now. I mean,
Ooh.
I always
Well,
have
hold
liked
on.
him, all
Are
right.
you a believer? Because I think there are some interesting teams like who were in last year who were not in the like Iowa State being first four out, next four out, like Wisconsin not being a tournament team. That's
I
kind of
agree with
wild.
that. I agree with that
What's the case
takeaway.
against Wisconsin being a tournament team?
Well, they returned less than half of their scoring. And to be honest, the only reason they were any good at all for most of the year last year was Johnny Davis, who is not on
Mm-hmm.
the team this year. Chucky Hepburn will have to become a much more efficient player than he was last year for them to take a step forward. Tyler Wall is an interesting piece for them. If he can continue to progress upwards, he could be pretty good, but that's your likely 5, I think. And he cannot shoot threes, which really, or I guess he'll be the 4. And at the 4, he's a terrible shooter, so that kind of limits your offensive spacing. I mean, it was good for them to turn it around, but they were a paper tiger the entire way that were entirely dependent on if Johnny Davis could just rescue them that night or not. He could against a 14 seed and was able to against unable to against an 11. The case against Iowa State is also interesting, where it's more or less the same thing, just with their talent as last year, where they lost a lot but went hard in the transfer portal. Losing Tyrese Hunter feels like a real big blow to them. And I'm not sure how they're going to cope with that, really. I think that it's going to be I would personally slide them as more on the inside than the out one, but the case against them making the field is reasonable.
Yeah, it should be interesting, and I think that's something to monitor, because I don't think Wisconsin fans would be all too thrilled. And I also just think Florida State missing would be a huge bummer, and kind of a weird turn the last couple of years for Leonard Hamilton's bunch. So I'm curious if that holds. But we shall see. We shall see. We still got a lot of basketball, and some might say an entire season to play before we have to freak out about something like this. Home and home, though, this is perhaps the most Will Warren thing on the menu for today, because
that's right.
We do not like neutral sites. We don't want the games in the Barclays Center. We want home and homes. This list, just the biggest home and home series that Kyle Boone of CBS Sports would like to see. We should also mention, shout out to Duke and Arizona for putting a home and home on the docket today. So that's fun, because that's going to be cool. Like Arizona going to Duke and Duke going to Arizona. That's going to be a big atmosphere. Fans are going to be into it. Student section will be wild. Like, that's a big primetime matchup. That'll be fun. When Arizona and Duke are both, it looks like are going to be perennial top 10 teams for the foreseeable future. So that'll be a big matchup. But we shall see. From this list, though, was there any big omission? Was there one that you already have been like, this is the home and home I want, and it's not on this list?
I think the obvious one is so we'll cover a couple that are on the list real quick, just so people have some context. So Gonzaga Duke is an obvious one that should be happening already, frankly. I don't understand why that's not yearly. Kentucky, Indiana should be back on too. I wonder, I don't know if there's like a Tom Crean thing where there's a discriminator if it was an Archie era deal, but that should happen. One that'll happen anyway that's not on this list is Kansas Houston. I think that should be a yearly game. But
it's going to happen anyway. They're moving to Big 12 next year.
Yeah, so that'll be out there anyway. There are three that stand out to me, one of which is more or less already annually played, but should be played not at neutral sites, Duke and Kentucky.
Yeah.
I don't understand why those two teams don't play home and away every year. You can make I don't really feel like it's an argument even. Those are the two biggest college basketball programs, the most well-known. And I mean, if you want to make the argument for UNC or whatever, then sure. But
I think
Duke and UNC
Kentucky
play each other all year.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Duke and Kentucky should be playing. But if you want to get UNC in here, why don't Kansas and UNC play a home and home every year?
The Roy Williams Classic.
The Roy Williams Classic. And I know he's not there anymore, but the literal last college basketball game we saw was these two teams putting on a great show for millions on a neutral site. And it's two of the four best college basketball programs. Kansas's arena is amazing. UNC's arena, I don't think it measures up quite to that level or even to Duke's, but I've heard it's pretty cool. So those are two good, and obviously UNC is going to have a good crowd. So those are two great arenas you need to be seeing every year. So I think.
Wait, hold on, Will. Did you not enjoy Duke, Kentucky at MSG? Would you have rather that not been played at MSG?
I think they should play it on an aircraft carrier off of Hawaii for some reason, or wherever it is, San Diego. Who cares? But one that is not on this list that's not obvious. It's not quality, but it's arena based for me, because so much of why it annoys me that we see these games at neutral sites is these teams have like great arenas they could just play at. Some schools don't, but these two do, and you need two elite arenas. All you got to do is go to one elite basketball state. So Butler and Indiana have played each other 5 times in the last decade. Do you want to know how many times they've played at either's home arena?
0?
0 of those times.
Yeah.
0 of those times have been in either school's home arena. They've been in an NBA arena, Bankers Life, with no connection to either school other than it's probably close to Butler's campus. What are we doing here?
Why has
I'm
that
wi-
never happened?
It's so stupid. The last time they played at one another's school, Butler played at Indiana in 2011. 2011.
Do you think it's a thing where Indiana doesn't want to lose a Butler and they don't want that look of
Yeah,
just
and they should get over it because
right?
this is, I mean, this would be, I mean, and also I guess I could understand it then because Butler's a Horizon League school, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe they might have moved up by then, but because they were I think they're in the A10 briefly. But either way, Big East versus Big Ten, that's two
Mm-hmm.
power conferences now. It doesn't matter to lose to Butler anymore. People lose to Butler all the freaking time, or at least they used to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to give this idea 1 to 2 years to let Butler get back into standard Butler shape under Thad Matta. But by 2025, this needs to be an every year home and home series. 1 year at Assembly, 1 year at Hinkle. Those are two of the great arenas college basketball has to offer. It's been long enough. Get it back on the books.
You could also do Butler, Ohio State home and home, the Thad Matta Bowl.
Yeah, but Ohio State's home arena doesn't really interest me that much. It's a nice enough one, but it's not historic in the way Assembly Hall is.
It does have the varsity logo from Atlanta, so my Atlanta
Yeah.
folks, where it always threw me off when I would watch an Ohio State game there. I'm like, why do they have a varsity logo? And it's not the same thing. That's not what it is. But I'm sure I'm not alone as an Atlanta original. But
I
yeah, I
think
don't know.
it's also that Ohio State calls it the Value City Arena, and I know everything is sponsored now, but that just
Yeah,
doesn't sound right.
is that what they
Value
call it?
City Arena versus Assembly Hall. Which one sounds cooler?
Yeah, we should just stop. Like one of the things collectively and broadcasters and everybody else, it's like, yeah, that is technically what it's called, but we're not like we're just all as sports fans making a universal decision to overlook that and call it what it needs to be called, and just be
Mm-hmm.
like, we're not doing that. Like I will never write like Heinz Field if I ever have to write Heinz Field um, in a NFL Pittsburgh Steelers article or whatever. I'm writing Heinz Field. I'm not writing what it's called now. Like I'm writing Staples Center. I'm not writing crypto.com arena. This is not happening. Like I'm not doing this. I refuse.
Yeah, it's like when they had the Rose Bowl presented by PlayStation for a few years.
Yeah, I just whatever. Any Tennessee notes?
None as of late. We're kind of in a dead period. I mean, we saw Zakai Ziegler move into his parents or
Mm-hmm.
family move into
That was
their
very
new
nice.
home. That was very nice. There have been some charming interviews between Josiah James and Tyreek Key, but we're kind of in a period where it's like nothing's really coming out. I haven't heard anything about what conference game comes first. I think everybody's just sort of waiting for, I don't know, like 3 to 4 weeks from now, something like that for the schedule release, and then we'll find out more. But there was the cool news that November 13th, which I think is a Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee plays Colorado, unfortunately at a neutral site at Bridgestone.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens there, but I am excited about the Justin Edwards decision. Like that would
Mm.
be like everyone just is kind of seems like penciled in Edwards to Kentucky, but what an like we could have an apocalyptic day on twitter.com where I will not partake if Kentucky blows the Edwards signing and he ends up at Tennessee. If Rick Barnes pulls that one out of the hat, I think he's committing on Monday if I have it correctly.
Mm.
Um, that'll be wild. That'll be a fun day on twitter.com.
Yeah, Rick Barnes getting the NIL hookup
Oh my
with
goodness, a last
SNS
second one.
cafeteria.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Well, that should be cool, but we'll get there. We'll end on this. It's our Kim Palm series season in review. Will Warren, St. Mary's. Speaking of the WCC, a very good basketball team, one of the best 25 in the country this past year. What did you make of the 2021-2022 St. Mary's team, and where do you see them going forward?
So I've had a little bit of a mini crush on them for like going on 15 years now, where it is like the late 2000s and they're always frisky. This is the Patty Mills, Matthew Dellavedova, Omar
Mm-hmm.
Samhan era. They had that 1 year they made the Sweet 16. And the thing that stood standard for them for so long was like every time you turned in, they got terrific shots. Their offense was so fun to watch. They shot the ball super well. They made like 40% of their threes a ton of the time. They gave Matthew Dellavedova like a 10-year NBA career. So that's kind of a big deal to me. And then all of a sudden in the COVID year, their offense turned to garbage while the defense kept them alive. And
Mm-hmm.
that held true this past year. They only ranked 51st in offense, which
Hmm.
from 2010 to 2020, that would have been their second worst offensive ranking.
Mm-hmm.
But they ranked 12th best defensively, which was their best defense of all time. They were terrific at shutting down the boards. They never fouled. They forced a lot of one-on-one scoring. They took away three-point attempts. I mean, you just got to go back and watch that game where they beat Gonzaga at home to see that in action. They played a pretty mediocre offensive game.
Hmm.
They did not shoot very well. They did not really get to the line at all. Not much work on the offensive boards. Barely won the turnover battle, but they forced Gonzaga into a billion tough twos. I mean, Drew Timme was held scoreless for 30 minutes or something like that. And Chet fouled out. It was a game where, teams lose weird ones on the road in college basketball all the time, but Gonzaga does not look helpless on offense ever. And they did
Mm-hmm.
against St. Mary's because they had a terrific game plan. So they weren't as watchable or as friendly to the eye. One need only to look back to them playing Wisconsin around Thanksgiving for a truly disgusting test of how much you can handle in a given basketball game.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked for them, and it worked to the tune of a round of 32 visit. Whooped Indiana, got whooped by UCLA, but I don't think anybody would really be offended by that because UCLA was very good.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, you closed your regular season by beating Gonzaga. That's huge to them. So, I mean, again, for 15 years now, back when I was a bigger message boarder, I used to have this like standard list I'd keep around for whenever Tennessee was involved in a coaching search, which was more or less every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I had one, Randy Bennett was always on that wish list because it's just standard. St. Mary's is always frisky,
Mm-hmm.
always tough to beat. You may not love their style of basketball, but it always works. They've never been bad
Yeah.
since I have started watching college hoops. And for a team that really doesn't have much of a recruiting base, is pretty much entirely built on upperclassmen, 4-year guys, you're not going to see them go and get a recruit of any note whatsoever. For them to consistently be this, second and show tough team to beat in the West
Mm-hmm.
Coast Conference, in a conference where, frankly, that team should be BYU every year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good status to have. And I look forward to seeing, they don't return quite as much this year as they did last, but I look forward to seeing, what can they do to follow that up.
Do you think they're better this year than they were last year?
No, I mean, they lost Tommy Kuzi, who is kind of the heart and soul of that team. They do return a decent bit, but they're going to have to replace a bunch. And I mean, their rotation as it stands right now is looking at including 3 or even 4 freshmen, which is never great for a mid-major.
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll be better. I think that kind of where Lunardi had them, he had them as the actual last team in his field.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere on that bubble feels pretty apt. Like last 4 in, first 4 out. That's kind of where they're going to be around most of the season, if I had to guess. But yet again, they're going to be a tough out. I mean, I don't know who they'll have on their non-conference slate because I don't think it's fully decided. But it wouldn't surprise me if they pop up and beat somebody of note this year, or even once again pull off one over Gonzaga at home.
Who do you think it leads the team in usage?
That's a tough one. I would probably say Logan Johnson is the best bet. But I've kind of learned to not really be surprised by much of anything they do. So Logan Johnson would be the best bet, but Alex Dukas could do it. Kyle Bowen, probably one of those 3 seniors.
What's the best way they match up with Gonzaga? Is there a chance they match up with Gonzaga with what we know about Gonzaga's roster now?
I think you just do the same thing where you crank the pace down to 0. Take away the threes and just say, Gonzaga, if you can hit a bunch of 10-footers, take your 20-point win and go home. But if you can't hit 10-footers tonight, we're going to have a chance. Basically, to quote, I think you should leave, you got to slop it up.
We're all trying to find the guy who did this.
Mm-hmm.
We are. Well, let's end on this. The rehearsal. Will.
Yes,
It was great. It
it's
was intense.
incredible,
The
and it's
fiance loved it more
amazing.
than Nathan for you.
Yeah, it's amazing because if you think about it, Finding Francis is more or less a dry run for
Mm-hmm.
what this was.
Yes.
Um, but I kind of find Core more likable than old Bill. Bill was very lovable by the end, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, Core, it's just like he's this very socially awkward, sweethearted guy in his 50s who
Can't
has
decide if he
built
wants
up.
to spray on his hair or does not. That was the hair
Yeah, that
change mid. That was a
bad,
lot.
bad
That was not
choice.
good. It's not good.
Bad choice. But I mean, it's crazy to me to think of him building what really is. I mean, yes, it's a big deal for him to lie about his educational status. We're just going to do some spoilers here,
Yeah.
basic ones. I'm not going to go too into detail, but
If you have not watched the rehearsal,
stop
episode
here.
1, please stop. Yeah, here.
For him to lie about his educational status, yes, that's like kind of a big deal. But the fact he thought Trisha was going to beat him up or whatever was hilarious. I was like, because even at the park where they have the
Mm-hmm.
actor, admit that her daughter is not really named Trisha, which is
Mm-hmm.
just an elite galaxy brain moment. Um, Even there, she's just like, yeah, whatever. Though I was jarred by Trisha thinking 39 was old to have, or too young to have your first kid.
Oh my god. So that was fiance looked at me when she said that and I was like, yeah, that's insane. Like that was I mean, Trisha was a star for me. Just some
Yes,
crazy
and
takes.
fake Trisha was incredible.
I don't know. It's a gift, man, that they were able
Yeah.
to just be like they just transformed into that person after just spending a little bit of time with them. And we're like, okay,
Yes.
got it. I know what they're I mean, the whole thing where she's just like, yeah, she like the way Nathan's like, and she was the one being interviewed. But she ended up talking the whole time about herself and everything else. And it was like everything you need to know about this person in that interaction. But man, I just everything about it. I also very much loved when he was like, I think I'm gonna find like those. What did he say? Like, I don't want to mess up the quote, but of just like, oh, if those Chinese had not created.
It's days like this when I curse the Chinese for inventing gunpowder. All time line.
Like I'm gonna think about that for a really long time. Like that probably got the most audible laugh from me, and I love that this guy. I could not believe he didn't put two and two together. That he remembered all those answers popping up throughout the week, and he just knew them. Like he won and didn't think about it.
That and the part of it I've been thinking about the most this week, or actually two. Stop biting me, Cedric. Sorry, the cat is gnawing on my knee because I haven't fed him yet. But anyway, the first and lesser part is when he does the poop joke,
Yeah.
but Core doesn't laugh, and then he goes into like a momentary mental tailspin on how the joke wasn't well received, and he wonders if he's ruined the entire rehearsal. But secondly, the whole Thrifty Boy scene,
Oh my god.
where he sucks the ketchup out of the ketchup packet, is truly unreal. That's that, and then I don't know if you noticed, but on his jacket, like the tag from the thrift store is still on it,
I did not notice that.
which is a beautiful little addition to the fit.
That's incredible.
Thrifty Boy is going to be the Halloween fit of the year. I'm calling it now, and I'm looking forward to naming our bar trivia team Orange Juice No Pulp. I don't know if they're going to be able to top this episode is the problem. It could suffer from a little bit of Twin Peaks syndrome where the pilot
Whoa! We're not throwing out the Twin Peaks is one of my favorites. Every episode was good.
No,
Delight.
Twin Peaks intro way better than the rest of the episodes are good, but the Twin Peaks intro is one of the greatest episodes of
Well, that's a pilot
television
movie. That was like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
It's like Lost, where the Lost part 1 and part 2 were insane.
But that's my fear is that they threw everything in this pilot, and the rest of the show is just it's going to be awesome, but it's not going to measure up to the pilot.
I don't think so. I believe in
him
Nathan.
With seeing that still with him in the laptop harness at a Raising Cane's gives me a lot of hope.
It's just incredible. I'm here for it. It's a great show.
Yes,
folks, go check it out. It has the seal of approval of the Chase Thomas podcast and Stats by Will. So there you go.
The most heart pounding ending of any show I have witnessed in years.
And we will never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know. Incredible work. And the filmography and what they're doing there is just incredible. Stats by Will, follow him on Twitter, Stats by Will. Go to statsbywill.com. Bookmark that if you have not already done so. And I will talk to you next week.
Talk to you soon.